Simon bar Kokhba, born Simon ben Kokhba, was a significant figure in Jewish history, known for leading a rebellion against the Roman Empire. This uprising, often referred to as the Bar Kokhba Revolt, was the second large-scale rebellion of the Jewish people against Roman occupation, following the first failed revolt in 70 CE that resulted in the destruction of the temple. Although the Bar Kokhba Revolt ended in defeat, it had profound consequences for the Jewish people and their historical and cultural identity. To understand Simon bar Kokhba's role, it's essential to examine the political and social context leading up to the revolt. The region of Judea had been under Roman rule when Pompey the Great conquered the area. Despite being granted some degree of autonomy, tensions between the Roman authorities and the Jewish population persisted. The Jewish people resented Roman interference in religious and political affairs, high taxation, and the presence of Roman legions in their land. The First Jewish-Roman War was a catastrophic conflict that ended with the destruction of Jerusalem and the Jewish temple. This war had devastating consequences for Jewish society, as it resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands and the scattering of the Jewish population. After the war, the Jewish people were subjected to strict controls and heavy taxation to prevent further uprisings. However, the sense of injustice and the desire for national and religious restoration continued to simmer beneath the surface. The Second Jewish Revolt, led by Simon bar Kokhba, was triggered by several developments in Roman policy and governance in Judea. Among these was the emperor's decision to rebuild Jerusalem as a pagan city named Aelia Capitolina, complete with a temple dedicated to the Roman gods. This action was seen as a severe affront to Jewish hopes of rebuilding their own temple and restoring Jerusalem as a center of worship. The situation was further exacerbated by reports that religious practices such as circumcision were being banned or restricted, which many Jews viewed as an attempt to erase their cultural and religious identity. Simon bar Kokhba emerged as a leader during this period of turmoil. Little is known about his early life, but historical records suggest that he was a charismatic and capable military commander. His original name was Simon ben Kokhba, but he came to be known as bar Kokhba, which means son of the star. This name was given to him by his supporters, who believed that he was the prophesied Messiah who would lead Israel to freedom. The name's messianic connotations are derived from the prophecy in the Hebrew Bible, which speaks of a star that would rise out of Israel. Bar Kokhba's messianic credentials were further bolstered by the support of Rabbi Akiva, one of the most respected religious leaders of his time. Rabbi Akiva proclaimed Bar Kokhba as the Messiah, believing that he was chosen by God to restore the kingdom of Israel. This religious endorsement gave bar Kokhba immense authority and helped him unite disparate Jewish factions under his command. The Bar Kokhba revolt began in 132 CE, as a well-coordinated and widespread insurrection against Roman rule. Unlike previous uprisings, this revolt was not a spontaneous outburst of violence but a carefully planned rebellion with a clear political and religious goal, to restore Jewish sovereignty in Judea. Bar Kokhba's forces were highly organized, and the rebels established an independent Jewish state for a brief period, complete with its own government and administrative apparatus. Coins minted during this time reflect the national aspirations of Bar Kokhba's movement. These coins often bore the words, Year 1 of the Redemption of Israel, and displayed symbols such as the temple facade, the lulav, a palm branch used in the Jewish festival of Sukkot, and the harp. These inscriptions and symbols signaled that Bar Kokhba was not merely leading a military rebellion but was also asserting a renewed sense of Jewish identity and national pride. The initial successes of the revolt were significant. Bar Kokhba's forces managed to capture several key cities, including Jerusalem, which had been off-limits to Jews since the end of the First War. The rebels took control of the Judean highlands, fortifying themselves in strategic positions and building an extensive network of caves and tunnels to evade Roman forces. The revolt's early victories sent shockwaves through the Roman Empire and prompted a fierce response from Emperor Hadrian. The Romans, caught off guard by the strength and organization of the revolt, initially struggled to contain it. Emperor Hadrian realized that suppressing the rebellion would require a significant military effort, so he called upon Julius Severus, one of his most experienced generals, to lead the campaign against Bar Kokhba. Severus adopted a strategy of attrition, avoiding direct confrontations and instead focusing on cutting off the rebel supply lines and isolating their strongholds. The Romans systematically destroyed towns and villages suspected of supporting the revolt, using scorched earth tactics to deprive Bar Kokhba's forces of food and shelter. This strategy slowly weakened the rebels, who found themselves besieged and unable to resupply their forces. The war devolved into a brutal guerrilla conflict, with Bar Kokhba's forces using hit-and-run tactics and the network of caves and tunnels to launch surprise attacks on the Romans. The decisive battle of the war took place in 135 CE at the fortified city of Betar, located southwest of Jerusalem. Betar served as Bar Kokhba's last major stronghold, and its defense was fierce. According to historical sources, the Romans laid siege to Betar, and the siege ended in a bloody massacre. Bar Kokhba himself was killed in the battle, and his followers were slaughtered or captured. The fall of Betar marked the end of the revolt and the final defeat of Jewish resistance in Judea. The aftermath of the Bar Kokhba revolt was catastrophic for the Jewish people. The consequences of the revolt were felt on multiple levels. The war resulted in a staggering loss of life. Estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed, and many more were sold into slavery or forced into exile. The demographic impact was profound, leaving the Jewish population of Judea severely diminished. Entire towns and villages were razed, and the countryside was left desolate. Many of the rebel strongholds were systematically destroyed, and agricultural lands were either confiscated by the Romans or left barren. Jerusalem itself was renamed Aelia Capitolina and rebuilt as a Roman colony. Jews were banned from entering the city, except on the anniversary of the destruction of the temple, when they were permitted to mourn their losses. Jewish religious practices were further restricted, and the teaching of Torah was banned. Many prominent Jewish leaders and scholars were executed, including Rabbi Akiva. The loss of these figures dealt a severe blow to Jewish religious and intellectual life. Despite his ultimate defeat, Simon Bar Kokhba remains a symbol of Jewish resistance and perseverance. His rebellion, though unsuccessful, represents a pivotal moment in Jewish history. Bar Kokhba's leadership demonstrated that the Jewish people, even after the devastation of the First War, were still willing to fight for their freedom and sovereignty. Over time, Bar Kokhba's legacy has been reinterpreted in various ways. In modern Israel, Bar Kokhba is often celebrated as a national hero, embodying the spirit of resistance against foreign rule. The modern Zionist movement viewed him as a symbol of Jewish self-determination and the struggle for national renewal. In rabbinic literature, however, Bar Kokhba's image is more complex. Some rabbis viewed his revolt as a misguided and ultimately disastrous attempt at messianic redemption. The devastation that followed the revolt led some to question the wisdom of such violent resistance and to reframe the Jewish struggle in more spiritual and intellectual terms. Modern archaeology has unearthed significant evidence of the Bar Kokhba revolt. Letters attributed to Bar Kokhba himself have been found in caves in the Judean desert, along with weapons, coins, and other artifacts. These discoveries provide valuable insight into the organization and daily life of the rebels, as well as Bar Kokhba's leadership style.